I'm going to go ahead and just start talking a little bit more about my first engineering job and what I wish I had known, right? Everyone here is one day, if not already, going to take that next step and actually become an engineer. You're going to go into your first day caffeinated, excited, ready to perform and be your best. But there are so many things that you just don't know yet. You've done all the reading, you've done all of the coding and some more reading and some more coding. You're partaking in SheHacks, hacking away, you're learning and you're engaging. So when it comes to that first day, here are the things that I want y'all to take away and be prepared for so that you can go in and be ready to succeed. Now, before we start in, I was already introduced, but just to quickly recap, my name is Rebekah Whittle, and I'm a solutions engineer at Circle CI. I am a Texan, so if you hear a little bit of a twang, it's because I am in Texas in the United States. I am a fan of the pop star Taylor Swift, and I love going outside. So those are just a few fun facts about me. Now, we're going to go ahead and start talking about these 3 things that I wish I'd known. And the first one is over-communication. Now, over-communicate is probably something that you've heard thrown around or you've maybe read on a blog post. Over-communicate, make sure you're communicating. But what does this mean? What does it mean to communicate as a software engineer? So a few things here. Engineers who communicate are more likely to succeed, right? So what does this entail? It means giving updates. It means asking questions and leaning on your peers. When I had my first job and I was working as a software engineer, a little bit overwhelmed at this tech company in Austin, Texas, I didn't really know how to communicate. I was given this really big project. It was a cool project. I got to go in and totally redo our B2B side of the application. And I felt invigorated. And I also felt really cool that they gave me that responsibility. So I started just coding. I hunkered down, I heads down, and I just coded. And that's all I did was code, 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 code. But a few things happened here. I didn't communicate the problems I was facing. I didn't communicate or ask questions when I faced blockers. I just tried to figure it out myself. I didn't give updates as to where I was. And because of that, because of this lack of communication and confidence in communicating, the project actually took longer than expected. I ran into problems that my peers and my mentor and my manager could have helped me solve. And I also could have learned more if I would simply have just asked questions. So these are a few key aspects of over-communicating. Being able to actively ask questions with your peers and say, hey, I've run into this issue. Can you help me out? Giving updates as to where you are. And then, of course, just leaning on those around you, communicating with them, making sure it's a collaborative effort and not a cathedral project. That is what it looks like to over-communicate. And that's something that you will hopefully learn from my failed experiences and implement in your first job. Second thing that I wish I would have understood a little bit more in my first job was taking ownership. Now, taking ownership, I think, has some interesting connotations to it. When we think of taking ownership, a lot of times we think about maybe something we were assigned to do. And so we say, oh, I was working on this because I was assigned this project. Or we think maybe a little bit more so in the aspect of, saying like, I did this and trying to really like butt yourself in. But when I speak of taking ownership, what I'm talking about are a few key aspects. It's tracking your work, taking on responsibilities from that work, and then finding your strengths. So again, another story about my first job. So remember that B2B site that I was working on? I was working on that B2B site. It was a really cool project that I was working on. it wrapped up, and I learned a lot from that, and they ended up assigning me to doing some more feature work and development. And I decided to take on a little bit more responsibility in that work. I had learned from my previous project a few things, and I wanted to try harder in the second project. And a few of those things was I was actually implementing A/B testing on these features. And with that came this newfound responsibility and ownership of what tool were we going to use to track the data? What data were we looking for? And then, of course, being able to cross-team communicate that with product and the data team as well. So there was a lot of work going on in this one project I was given. So I had to track my work. Hey, not only did I complete what was assigned, but I also did the research. I also worked with our product org. I also worked with our data organization. So tracking that and being able to say and come to my manager and show that I was doing a lot more than just what was assigned was very integral to that project. Once that project started wrapping up and I had decided the tool to use, I had worked with the cross-functional teams to say, this is the data, this is what the data is saying. We actually found that the work had failed. Yeah, so the work that I had put out, all of this time, all of these resources into these A/B tests was actually inaccurate, and it ended up failing. And the hardest part of that project was learning to take responsibility for that failure. When we take ownership of our work, it is not only when it succeeds. It is not only when you build out the whole new platform, when you redo the infrastructure, when you set up new clusters for your Kubernetes projects. It's also when the things fail. This is a huge part of learning in your first job, that you're going to have to take ownership on the moments that are hard, because you are an engineer who takes responsibility for your work, whether it's the best work you've ever done or whether it's work where you can learn from. And then lastly, I found my strengths, right? So if you're tracking your work and you're taking responsibility for when it doesn't succeed, eventually the data is going to align and you're going to realize, hey, maybe my strengths don't lie in working in data-centric projects. Or maybe I actually really loved doing the research for the tooling infrastructure. Maybe you start to take on more work that requires that integral aspect of vetting a product, vetting the tool, understanding how the tool works and what you're going to get out of that tool. Maybe you start to learn that you really enjoyed setting up all those Kubernetes clusters and you actually want to head towards more of the SRE area or even DevOps area. Being able to hone in on tracking your work, taking responsibility for it, will help you eventually find your strengths, and it will help you navigate the career that you are beginning. So make sure to take ownership in that first job, because at the end of the day, it is your work, and you get to decide whether it is the best work you do and then learn from the work that might not succeed. And then final aspect that I wish I would have known going into my job, and I think this is also probably the most important part of going into your first job, is to stay optimistic. When I say stay optimistic, I am not saying, it doesn't matter, I don't need to work hard, I don't need to try, it's all gonna work out anyways. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying brush off everything because it's all gonna work out. It's all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it's a cloudy day, but you still have to stay optimistic. Optimism is knowing that your work will pay off. It's pressing on. It's doing the hard work even when maybe it's not succeeding. That project that I did, right? Remember I was doing that A/B testing and it ended up not succeeding? That was really hard. It was a very difficult time. I felt very inferior. I felt like I had kind of let down my manager and that I'd let down my team. But what I did is I stayed optimistic. I put my head down. I took the opportunity to learn from where I had failed so I could grow as an engineer. Another story here. So back in the day, this wasn't my first job at this point, but I was working contractually for a company, and I was doing a really cool project, really loved it. And I saw that there was an open position at a company that was awesome. I had used their tool at my first job. I had actually advocated to implement that product and that tool at the current contract work I was in. And so I took a leap and I actually applied to that role. It was a little bit different of a role than my software engineering background, but I was like, you know what? It's worth the risk. I'm going to apply to this and see what happens. The process of going through that hiring process was very long and taught me a lot. And I was very invested. So weeks had passed and I was moving forward. And eventually I received an email from that company. And they said, hey, unfortunately, we're not going to be moving forward with you as a candidate. Nothing on you, more of just lack of experience in this type of role, and hope for the best for you. And y'all, I was bummed. Like, I remember that email clearly, even to this day, because I really wanted to work for that company and I loved this company. And I was like, shoot, like all this hard work, all this time, just not paying off. Like, what did I do wrong? And instead of kind of beating myself up for it, or, saying, oh, that company, I don't need to work there anyways, I actually decided to take note and learn from that. I was like, things will work out. If it's meant to be, it will be. And took on another project contractually and kept working for months. And a few months rolled by, and I got another email from that same company. I was like, whoa, what's going on? And they reached out and said, hey, we actually just opened up an associate role for that job. And we really enjoyed you during the hiring process and think you would be a great fit for that role. Since you don't have the experience in that role prior, we think you would be really great in this role and you could work in it. I was overjoyed. I was so excited. So of course I was like, absolutely. Went through the final rounds and ended up getting an offer letter. And now I've been working at that company for over a year and have gone from associate solutions engineer to solutions engineer at Circle CI. But I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if I hadn't stayed optimistic. If I hadn't kept working and kept learning and taking in the feedback from everyone around me. Optimism, again, is pressing on and doing the hard work because it will pay off. I know it will. So a few things with optimistic people is they stay hardworking. They're great to work around. When you work with someone that's optimistic and continues to press on, they end up being just natural leaders on the team. You end up wanting to work on projects with them. They end up bringing a lot of light and enjoyability into the role. And at the end of the day, their work does pay off. And so I tell you that because as you're sitting here at SheHacks, it's a late night for you guys. I know that for me, it's actually early morning on Saturday, but for y'all, it's a later evening. And I'm sure that at some point, you're going to get frustrated and the project or the application or whatever you're building isn't going to work and things are going to seem very overwhelming. And even in the job application process, as you're reaching that first role, it's going to get hard. But I believe in you. And I would hope that you believe in yourself as well and that you stay optimistic because things will work out. So finally, I want to leave this very easygoing conversation with just understanding that you've got this. That first role is going to teach you a lot. And I would hope that you stay open to what it teaches you, just as I have. There are going to be moments where you get in over your head and you feel like not staying optimistic. There are going to be times when you need to communicate that you don't know something, which is going to be hard. We're engineers. We're the people that try to know everything, right? We're the people come to. But there are going to be moments where you have to say, hey, I don't know why this is breaking. Or, I'm actually behind on this project by a few days. And giving those updates, over communicating with your team and their stakeholders. Taking ownership is going to be something that You learn, and I'm still learning. Years later, I'm still learning about taking ownership for my work, right? Taking on the projects that are a little bit harder for you because they'll teach you something. But even when they don't work out, still saying, that was my work and I did what I could. And then finally, again, to hone in on my favorite part of this, staying optimistic. Keep on, keep pressing forward. Y'all are going to be great. And I'm very excited for what the future holds for each and every one of you. With that, I am available via LinkedIn if you want to continue this conversation. And if you have any questions about other things about your first role and what that entails, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank y'all so much.